Because when he died, the doctor said that if he wasn't drunk, he wouldn't have died.
Lahir dan besar di keluarga miskin, Aisha Rosalie akhirnya sukses menjadi aktris di Inggris. Ia mengaku tidak beragama, namun percaya Tuhan itu ada, apalagi ketika diuji dengan kesulitan.
I grew up in the UK. I grew up in a very poor family. We grew up in a council house. It's like very poor housing in the UK. It wasn't until later in my life when I started looking into being an actress. I didn't have a religion, but I had faith. In difficult moments, I would find myself talking to God. I didn't know what God was, who God is, but I would, if I was in a difficult scenario, I would be like, God, can you please help me?
Pertama kali Aisyah memikirkan tentang agama adalah saat berada di Masjid Biru, Turki. Sebelum sampai di masjid, prasangka terhadap Islam masih ada.
It was when I was in Turkey. And it was when I was in Blue Mosque, Sultan Ahmed, I think you guys call it. That's when I started really seeing into religion for the first time. But yeah, I did have prejudice. I definitely did have that notion. When I first visited a mosque in Turkey, I thought the people were going to tell me I can't go in. I thought that they were going to, I don't know, laugh at me. They were going to stare at me in a negative way. I expected the worst when I went into a mosque for the first time.
Kebencian Aisyah terhadap alkohol muncul karena kakaknya disebabkan oleh mabuk. Namun seiring bertambahnya usia, karena faktor lingkungan, Aisyah juga terjebak dengan arak.
My brother died from alcohol. But the reason why it affected me so much is because when he died, the doctor said that if he wasn't drunk, he wouldn't have died. He got drunk, he got in a fight. One punch it took, one punch, and he hit the floor, the brain hit the back of his head and he died. I always had a problem with alcohol. But my family, they didn't understand the negative impacts of alcohol. They actually carried on drinking. They drank more than they used to. My dad went to pubs even more. I saw him even less. He was always at the pub. And through him going to the pub, my dad then met a 15-year-old girl who he left my mum for. And I think what happened after this incident is I grew up hating alcohol. I hated parties. I couldn't attend parties. I felt really bad. But as I started getting older, probably around 20, I started thinking, oh, maybe it's not so bad. For me, it was about networking. Everyone said, if you go to these clubs, you'll meet the right people. You'll get in the right circles. You'll network. So I started doing it for that reason. There was one time when I was in LA, I went to a nightclub and somebody spiked my drink. And that same night, I ended up in hospital because somebody tried to kidnap me. And after that moment, I remember waking up in the hospital. I was in an awful state. And I remember thinking, why did I do this to myself? Like, I've always been against alcohol. Why have I started getting in this life? But the worst part was, after that, I carried on partying, not as much as my friends, a little bit here and there. And when I came to Turkey with bad intentions, looking for plastic surgery. Like I was actually trying to change myself. Allah waited until I lost my whole self until Allah took me to Islam.
Niat awal berangkat ke Turki untuk melakukan operasi plastik menjadi titik tolak dirinya mengenal Islam.
I think for me, the biggest thing that actually got me thinking about Islam seriously was when I did tasbih for the first time. So when I saw people in Turkey doing tasbih, I saw so many people doing it. So when I actually Googled for the first time what you're supposed to say when you do it, and I learned about Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, and I learned the meaning of these words, and I started doing it for the first time, there was another moment on top of that that was really special. And that was a moment when I was coming out of the mosque, Blue Mosque here in Istanbul. And I stood between Blue Mosque and Hagia Sophia. That's where I heard the azan. When you're standing between those two mosques, it's so loud. The azan is so loud. And I remember standing there and just hearing the azan and thinking, wow, that is so beautiful. That is so peaceful. And I remember in that moment, I had an hour journey back to my hostel. I had to walk an hour back to my hostel. I didn't know the way. And I remember feeling really anxious. I was thinking, how am I going to get back to my hostel? I'm in a foreign country. I don't know where to go. And I was panicking and the azan was still playing. And then all of a sudden, it was like all my worries just dropped. Like it was like everything just disappeared and my anxiety left my body. And I thought, God, if you're real, help me get back to my hostel. And in that moment, In a very, 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 very long time, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't worried. I just walked straight to my hostel. I didn't take a single wrong turn. I don't know how I did it. It was all by the grace of Allah. But I walked from Blue Mosque straight to my hostel with no intervention, no help. Nobody helped me. And I was calm the entire time. There was not one moment where I thought, I've taken a wrong turn. I don't know where to go. SubhanAllah, it wasn't me. It was Allah that got me back to my hostel. Like before I became Muslim, I think I spent a lot of my time being worried. Like everything worried me. Be like, what if I go in the street and this thing happens? What if I do this and this happens? And then once I discovered Islam, once I became Muslim, it was the remedy to my anxiety. I learned tawakkul. I learned about having faith in God, about having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That feeling was what actually drew me to Islam.